Hi everyone. So I'm back to finding out more about these Nabataeans of Iraq. And is it a coincidence that King Herod was half Nabataean and that the Nabataeans and the Edomites or Idumeans were, by the time of King Herod, possibly the same or very similar peoples? They had worked together or collaborated together a lot on the spice road and the spice trade. I believe that this then integrated into the Silk Road. Now, the fact that these Nabataeans are mentioned as coming from Iraq, although archaeologists say that these two groups aren't linked, I actually think that that is wrong. And it appears that Madame Helena Blavatsky also believed there was a link there. It's quite possible that these people moved into the region of the Negev and southern Jordan because of the association with these trading roads. So they were working and running the northern Silk Road merchant routes. And we know that the Edomites took over the control of the southern spice roads through the deserts around the Dead Sea through to Egypt. And this was at the time of Judah's exile to Babylon. And they worked with the Babylonians to run these trading routes. So to me, this makes sense that these Radhanite, or what I believe are the same people, Nabataeans, move south to have an elitist power base in this region to control the southern trading routes up through the Arabian Peninsula, from India across to Egypt and then up north into Iraq and Iran and so forth. So in this article, Mysticism from Iraq, Ancient Wisdom of the Nabataeans, written by Jacko Hammond and Tiller for Brill in 2006, he says that, or states that, his interest in this book was aroused by two things: P Blavatsky's reference to the manuscript Nabataean agriculture and the famous city of Petra in Jordan, which was largely hewn out of the rock by the Nabataeans. Now, as I've shown in my other videos, that most of this architecture of the Nabataeans was actually Achaemenid Persian. So it says there's a great deal of confusion among historians about the term Nabataeans because in different contexts and different times, it has referred to different groups of people. According to Hammond and Tiller, Nabataean agriculture is not connected with the Nabataeans who built Petra. P Blavatsky says that Nabataeans was. Now, no matter what people say about P Blavatsky, whether she was an occultist or not, she was a very well-studied woman, and she read a lot of ancient texts. She traveled to a lot of ancient places to back up her research. She came to the opinion that, in this quote here, the mystic name of the caste devoted to Nebo, god of secret wisdom, which shows on the face that the Nabataeans were an occult brotherhood. The Nabataeans, who, according to the Persian Yazidi, originally came to Syria from Bushra, were the degenerate members of that fraternity. Still, their religion, even at the late day, was purely Kabbalistic. So what it's telling us here, the Kabbalists, so we've got this astrological religion from Babylon, and to me, I believe that they're the merchants. So we have these Nabataeans in Syria, which I've spoken about. We have the King Herod connection there in southern Syria, and we have the Nabataeans in southern Jordan, in Petra, and we have Nabataeans in Iraq. So it only makes sense that Iraq is the original homeland, and they've moved out north to Syria and south to Petra. Nebo is the deity of the planet Mercury. And Mercury is the god of wisdom, or Hermes, and Buddha, which the Jews called the Lord on high, the aspiring, and the Greeks Nabo, hence Nabataeans. And in this artist's interpretation of Hermes, we see that Hermes is standing on the dragon. So we can see that St. George is possibly another representation of Hermes. If we look at a map and we look for Bushra, or here it says Bashra, it's in southern Iraq, and we know that this Radhanite region of Radan was in south of Baghdad. So it would appear that Bushra is in Jordan. It's a town in the Urbid Governorate, Jordan, but I'm not sure if this is the original ancient Bushra, because it's quite possible that this place was named after a different town. So it is saying here that there's a Bushra near Urbid in northern Jordan, close to the border of Syria, and to the east we have Iraq over here. Busra in Syria, and there's a similar named city in Iraq near the Persian Gulf, which is Basra. So clearly all linked to the same language or word. Getting back to the Nabataeans, it says here, Nabataean agriculture makes clear that Nabataeans was seen as a noble term and was used for ancient Chaldean sages and their followers. They lived in ancient Chaldea or Babylonia, present-day Iraq. It was not inconceivable that they had a branch in Petra, since various sculpted motifs in Petra correspond to those of ancient Chaldea and Babylonia. But we will restrict ourselves here to the manuscript and its context. In The Secret Doctrine, P Blavatsky repeatedly refers to Nabataean agriculture, saying that it is an extremely old compilation, is no apocrypha, but the repetition of the tenets of the Secret Doctrine under the esoteric Chaldean form of national symbols for the purpose of cloaking the tenets, just as the books of Hermes and Puranas are Egyptian and Hindu attempts the same. The work was well known in antiquity as it was during the Middle Ages. So, the argument against this book, Nabataean Agriculture, is that it was written in the Middle Ages by an Islamic scholar, and that he copied it from more ancient texts. P Blavatsky here is saying that just like the Book of Hermes and the Puranas are of an ancient Egyptian origin or philosophy, so with Nabataean agriculture is an ancient Chaldean philosophy, and that these Nabataeans were ancient Chaldeans. She also is stating here that it was well known in antiquity, and obviously this is where the writer of the original Nabataean agriculture, Ibn Washia, is stating what he does and referring to this knowledge of antiquity. See, says here, Nabataean agriculture is a translation of an Arabic manuscript from the 10th century AD. The Arab manuscript is a translation of an ancient Syrian manuscript made by Ibn Washia, born in Qusayyin, Iraq, in the 10th century. So basically what it's saying is that in the 10th century AD, Ibn Washia copied this manuscript, Nabataean agriculture, from an ancient Syrian manuscript whose age was uncertain. And it says it's unfortunately not available. But Ibn Washia says it was compiled by 3 Chaldean sages and comes from Mesopotamia, now largely Iraq. The book was begun by Sagrith and was later added to the Yanbushad and Quathama. A period of 21,000 years is said to have elapsed between Sagrith and Quathama. Now, Nabataean agriculture was never really translated to English, according to this article here, and the German scholar who translated it into German basically copped a lot of flack for it, and they said that it was not historically accurate. I think that there might be a purpose in actually hiding this information and keeping it esoteric. Clearly, P Blavatsky thought a lot of this literature. And if people found out about this Nabataean link, or if people connected the dots here, then it might actually reveal a lot about these particular merchant groups. Nabataean agriculture was brought to scholarly attention by Etienne Cochemere in a journal in 1835, but it was only after passages of the manuscript had been translated into German by Daniel Gwolson in 1856, the translation to which Blavatsky refers. In Hamian and Tiller's explanatory section in The World and the Gods, we are given an impression of the Nabataeans' cosmology. Everything arose and arises eternally from motion. The world is divided into supernal and lower worlds. The supernal world consists of spheres of the 7 celestial bodies, with above them the fixed stars. This is the classical system of Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. So we've got this astrological worship. So we have this ancient artifact from Petra, Nabataea, and we have what appears to be a woman, or the woman, and she is surrounded by zodiac signs. Here's a zoomed out image, and it's a man holding up this zodiac wheel with the woman in the center of it, or the goddess. So we can see that as far as the gods of Nabataea go, they are astrological gods. So on Wikipedia, we have gods and goddesses. Most of the deities in Nabataean religion were part of the pre-Islamic Arab pantheon, with the addition of foreign deities such as Isis and Atargatis. Dushara, a Nabataean deity whose name means Lord of the Mountain. Now this is important, Lord of the Mountain. He was widely worshipped in Petra. Dushara is venerated as a supreme god by the Nabataeans. Oftentimes he is referred to as Dushara and all the gods. He is considered the god of the Nabataean royal house. So King Herod was part of the Nabataean royal house. The fall of the Nabataean royal house to the Romans caused the religion to be cast aside and its main deity lost. So it's saying that it was then that Dushara was associated with other gods like Dionysus, Zeus, and Helios. Now if we look at Dushara, he's holding a staff and what appears to be a torch, some kind of vessel. Now this is important because he's associated with Zeus. When we look at Zeus, Zeus is the king of Mount Olympus. So he's the king of all the gods, was the first of the gods and very imposing figure, often referred to as the father of gods and men. He is the sky god who controls lightning when using it as a weapon, and thunder. Zeus is king of Mount Olympus, the home of the Greek gods, where he rules the world and imposes his will onto gods and mortals alike. Now, when we look at this picture of Zeus, he's holding this instrument here, which is lightning, or fire of the gods, basically, because when we look at the translation of lightning or fire in the Hebrew text, so when we go to Revelation 13 and we have the beast from the earth, and it says he maketh fire come down from heaven, and I've spoken about this before, but when we go to fire, it is the word per, means fire, and its usage can be for fire and heat, the heat of the sun. So we know that Zeus is the sun god. Lightning, figuratively, strife, trials, the eternal fire. So I've spoken a lot about Zoroastrianism as well, and the Zoroastrians and their god Ahura Mazda was the god of fire, the eternal fire. If we look at the word for lightning in the Strong's Hebrew, we get Barak, as in Barack, like a Barack Obama. And as I also have spoken about this before, we have Muhammad riding to heaven and back again in one night on a horse called Barak. So basically he was riding to heaven on lightning, coming down from heaven as lightning. And as I'll investigate further in this video about the link between Muhammad and the Nabataean people of Petra, and potentially their Herods, or this aristocratic, as Blavatsky called it, a brotherhood or an elite of this religion of these Nabataeans or Chaldeans. Now, in this Ancient Origins article, it's talking about the Vajra, the ancient weapon of war. And we see some of these ancient images here. This is a Hindu image. This one here is a Babylonian image. And the third one's Greek. And they're all holding a version of this weapon. It's a three-pronged weapon. It says the Vajra is the most important ritual implement of the Vajrayana Buddhism. In Sanskrit, the word Vajra is defined as something hard or mighty, as in a diamond. It symbolizes an impenetrable, immovable, and indestructible state of knowledge and enlightenment. Our knowledge of the Vajra goes back to deep antiquity. Texts indicate that the Vajra was not always a symbol of peace and tranquility, but something very different. It first appears in ancient India, where it was the primary weapon of the Vedic sky god Indra. So here we've got this sky god, just like Zeus was the sky god, and Dashura was the sky god, the king of the Devas. According to the Hindu Puranas, the evil Asuras, Namuchi and Vritra, removed all the light and moisture from the earth. It made the land inhospitable to living beings. Indra battled the demon gods unsuccessfully, and as the last resort called upon their supreme god Vishnu for help. So a weapon of the gods, Vishnu informed him that only the weapon that was neither solid nor liquid could kill Namuchi and Vritra. Vishnu had the divine carpenter Tvashta fashion Indra a marvelous weapon he could use to vanquish the dreadful Asuras. This new weapon, the Vajra, emitted thunderbolts. With it, Indra annihilated Namuchi and Vritra and returned the much-needed light and moisture back to the earth. The Rig Veda describes this conflict thus. Now I describe the glorious deeds of Indra, who holds Vajra. He killed the serpent and made waters flow. He broke the hearts of mountains. He killed the serpent which was taking refuge in mountain. Tvashta made the Vajra for him, like the cows making sounds. Flowing waters reached the sea. Mighty Indra chose Soma, the drink, and drank them 3 containers. Generous Indra held Vajra in his hand and killed firstborn among the serpents. That's in the Rig Veda 132. The Vajra, when used, was thrown at one's opponent. Nitin Kumar, in his article Ritual Implements in Tibetan Buddhism, tells us as a hurled weapon, the indestructible thunderbolt blazed like a meteoric fireball across the heavens in a maelstrom of thunder, fire, and lightning. Kind of sounds a bit like the story of Nikola Tesla's directed energy weapons, possibly. And I can also see the story of Star Wars in this, of holding an instrument in the hand that is like lightning. From destructive weapon to peaceful scepter. Traditional images of the Vajra depict it as a metal shaft with 3, 5, or 9 prongs that emanate from lotus blossoms on either end. Originally, according to the ancient Indian text, the Rig Veda, when Indra used the Vajra, it had open prongs. Buddhist legends suggest that Shakyamuni, the Buddha himself, took the Vajra from Indra and forced its prongs closed, thus transforming it from a destructive weapon to a peaceful scepter. So this is an image of the Vajra with open prongs. Scholars contend that there is no relationship between Indian, Greek, Australian, and Norse mythology, nor the cosmology of the Americas. They believe that each civilization conceived of their gods independently and that a deeper, older universal tradition does not exist. If this were the case, then the foundation of these societies, their myths, traditions, beliefs, and iconography should be unique to them, their location and their history. The tales of war, intrigue, and conquest that came out of American history are vastly different from those of England, France, India, and China. So too are the customs, traditions, and symbols that represent the nation. Yet, when we look at a wide range of ancient and indigenous groups, a pattern of commonality exists. Myths and symbols found in India readily appear in the oral and written descriptions of other cultures. They also appear in the artistic images. These representations seem to transcend time and location. The symbols of a thunderbolt as a tool of destruction, for example, surfaces in many ancient civilizations. Mythology unfailingly associates lightning with a sky god, the god of thunder, who uses it as a weapon. In the Western world, the thunderbolt is most readily associated with the Greek sky god Zeus. With it, he defeated the Titans and took control of the Greek pantheon. Myth tells us that Zeus freed the Cyclops, the master builders, who were imprisoned in the depths of the underworld, Tartarus. In gratitude for their release, they gave him a marvelous weapon, the thunderbolt. In another story, Zeus used his formidable weapon to battle the largest and most fearsome creatures of all Greek mythology. Early images of Zeus depict him holding a rod-like thunderbolt, while others show his deadly weapon with ends splayed with 3 prongs. So here's this image here. The Vajra of the Sumerians. A Vajra-like weapon also appears in Sumerian cosmology. So Sumerian cosmology is Babylonian cosmology, it's Chaldean cosmology. Its use is recorded in the Babylonian epic of creation, the Enuma Elish. A battle between the sky god Marduk and serpent Tiamat is detailed on the 4th tablet of this ancient document. The evil and powerful Tiamat, according to the Enuma Elish, was devising treacherous plans against Ea and the other reigning gods. The gods were afraid to invoke her evil wrath and search for a solution. Ea attempted to confront Tiamat, but instead of fighting, backed down. Marduk, his son, stepped forward and volunteered to fight the enraged serpent on one condition. If he were successful, he would have dominion over the entire universe. The gods agreed and provided Marduk with mighty weapons, including a bow, a mace, and a net to use in his battle against Tiamat. Images of this epic scene show Marduk holding a 3-tipped scepter in his hand. Subsequently, images clearly depict the same dead 3-pronged weapon. So this is probably where Neptune, or the king Poseidon of the sea, gets his 3-pronged fork from. Ironically, the god of the island of Rhodes is Poseidon. They gave him the unrivaled weapon, the destroyer of the enemy. Go cut off the life of Tiamat. Let the wind carry her blood into the depth under the earth. The gods, his father, issued the decree for the god Baal. They set him on the road which leadeth to peace and adoration. From the Enuma Elish. So we've got the Vajra in Norse mythology. The Rig Veda also offers an alternative description of the Vajra. Some texts represent it as a notchable metal club with thousands of prongs. We find this form of the Vajra in numerous other cultures. The most well-known stories that portray the Vajra in its club-like form come from Norse mythology. They are associated with the sky god Thor. His mighty hammer, Mjolnir, was the most fearsome weapon in Norse mythology. Image of the thunder god Thor traditionally shows him carrying his mighty hammer. So Thor is another version of Zeus. Some people believe that civilization moved out from India, and that was actually the hub of civilization. The general consensus is that the world civilization moved out from the Middle East, and I believe this version. I think that these Vedic religions aren't as old as the Babylonian religions, and that everything about this particular religious story emanates from Babylon. The Slavic mythology, we learn of the evil serpent Veles, who ascended from the underworld and stole something of value from the sky god Puran. Perun using lightning bolts would vanquish Velez back to his underground realm annually. So, getting back to the Zoroastrian religion and the eternal flame, the god Ahura Mazda. I've spoken about this in the past, how the whole concept of dualism comes from Zoroastrianism. And obviously, we're looking at these ancient religions and the concept of God or the gods fighting the dragon or the devil, and that this devil actually has the ability to be an equal to God, is a false doctrine, I believe. I think that there is God. In the beginning, there was God, and there is only God. There's nothing out there that can fight or combat God on an equal level. If you want to look at this metaphorically, though, there is dualism within the world, and that dualism is within us. We look at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and who is in the tree but this serpent creature that convinces Eve and Adam to eat of this fruit. And after eating this fruit, they now know good and evil. So as people, the human race, as sons of Adam, we all have this dualistic battle going on within our psyche, and it's a battle between the spiritual man and the fleshly man that's spoken of by Paul the apostle. This is why I believe, and I do believe that there was some kind of serpent or there's something associated with this, but I don't believe in Satanism or that Lucifer was Satan. I think that when the Bible speaks a lot about Lucifer and Satan, that it's referring to our nature, our internal struggle between good and evil after having eaten this fruit. And I do believe that there is evil in the world and that the serpent represents this evil. I don't understand exactly what that is, but a lot of the times the Bible is talking metaphorically about the battle within ourselves between good and evil, and this is that duality in this kingdom on earth. It's a shame because our concept of Satan and hell and the battle between God and Satan is a Roman Catholic version, and the Roman Catholic version is more than likely a Gnostic concept that goes back to the Zoroastrian dualism. In the earth, our flesh, we have duality, but in the kingdom of God, there is no duality. There's no Satan. There's nothing that can beat God. But these esoteric people tend to believe that there is. And, when we look at this religion of fire worship and Prometheus stealing fire from the gods and giving it to man, this is a Luciferic doctrine in that sense, Lucifer being the light bearer and giving knowledge and wisdom and technology to God. And we have that in this story of the Vajra. It's a technology from the gods that is given to man, fire, lightning, perhaps it means electricity or the knowledge of electricity. And this also ties into this Tartaria story that they had a secret knowledge of using some kind of electricity, or they had a secret technology. So we have a version of this Vajra in Irish mythology, the magical weapon of the hero Ulster. So there's a Vajra in South American culture. In the New World, we encounter a similar deadly lightning weapon used by the sky gods. Again, this is no coincidence. In the Aztec culture, there is the god Huitzilopochtli. I won't attempt that one again. With his weapon, Giocoti, the fire serpent, killed his sister. Now, what's the odds of all these cultures having the same story? And, I know that the Thunderbolts project and Electric Universe, people talk about thunderbolts from heaven, from the planets. What appears to be spoken of here, though, is some kind of technology. Whether the gods are referred to, going back to this Babylonian astrological religion, that they're talking about the gods being planets and the planets firing some kind of thunderbolt at the earth, or we're talking about some literal technology. So when we look at Prometheus, who stole the fire from Zeus, the punishment of Prometheus was a consequence of the theft of fire, and giving it to the humans is a popular subject of both ancient and modern culture. Zeus, king of the Olympian gods, sentenced Prometheus to eternal torment for his transgression. So, we have this image of Prometheus as the light bearer. He's the Lucifer, and he is giving light or knowledge or technology to man. And this is the story of the serpent in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So we could look at Prometheus as a serpent character, or Tiamat. He is a antagonist to the Olympian gods, and he is punished to eternal torment in hell, in inverted commas, because in Hebrew text there is no hell. There is no eternal place of fire and torment. So we have this story of Satan again, or the dragon, being tormented in hell, coming from this ancient Greek culture, but it's far more ancient than that because it comes from the ancient Babylonian story. And this ancient Babylonian story is one of Nimrod and going back to the descendants of Noah and the antediluvian people. And I believe that Nimrod was reinstituting this pre-flood religion and belief system. It would appear that the deluge was because of one of the solar cycles that's related to the great year, or the precession of the equinox. So every 12,000 and 6,000 years, we have some kind of solar event, or greater than that, a universal event related to the Milky Way and the center of the galaxy. And the swastika is a representation of the Milky Way through its seasonal rotation. The 4 seasons are the 4 arms of the swastika as the Milky Way moves through the heavens and turns with each season. But, we look at the swastika as in we have the positive symbol of the Aryan religions, and then we use it in the reverse for the Nazi. And it would appear that the swastika is, to me, a symbol of polarity, of moving backwards and forwards, or switching directions, or a pole shift between north and south, or a pole flip. And perhaps it's a symbol of the change of polarity of the universe during the great solar year. The Bible tells us that the last time this happened, the earth was flooded, and God warned Noah. In Genesis, it says, "Yes, I do establish my covenant with you. No more will all flesh be cut off by waters of a deluge, and no more will there occur a deluge to bring the earth to ruin. My rainbow I do give in the cloud, and it must serve as a sign of the covenant between me and the earth." So that's Genesis 9:11-13. The Bible also goes on to say in these various verses, 2 Peter 3-7, "But by the same word, the heavens and the earth that now exist are stored up for fire, being kept until the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly." 2 Peter 3:10, "But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, and then the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burned up and dissolved, and the earth and the works that are done on it will be exposed." And in the Old Testament, Malachi 4:1, "For behold, a day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and evildoers will be stubble. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch." Revelations 21:1, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. I came to cast fire on the earth, and would that it were already kindled. Now, this could be referring to the Holy Spirit and the tongues of fire, not necessarily burning the earth. But that being said, there's, some channels on YouTube that are talking about the sun nova and what will happen in this time. But if we look at this promise to Noah by God, and God keeps his promises that whatever happens in this next event of the precession of the equinox, it won't be an event that includes destroying the earth via water, and the earth will not be brought to ruin by water again. So biblically, the closest thing to hell and hellfire is the destruction of the earth by fire. So Prometheus is this Greek version of the god of fire. Now, here's just the Greek version of Ahura Mazda. Ahura Mazda, he is the first and most frequently evoked spirit of the Yasna. The literal meaning of the word Ahura is Lord, and that of Mazda is wisdom. So we can see in this story that Ahura Mazda is a Lucifer character that gives wisdom. He's the Lord of wisdom to mankind, and his worship is through worshipping fire and the eternal fire, or Ahura giving knowledge or wisdom to man or technology. So the first invocation of Ahura Mazda occurred during the Achaemenid period between 550 and 330 BC. Now, I've heard it earlier than that, possibly around 600 BC, with the Behustian inscription of Darius the Great. So the Persian Empire, until the reign of Artaxerxes II, Ahura Mazda was worshipped and invoked alone in all extant royal inscriptions. Now, I've heard people say, scholars say, that all of these religions are religions of the Messiah. The first religion of the Messiah comes from Persia, and it comes from this religion of Zoroastrianism and Ahura Mazda. So a lot of people say that Jesus wasn't real, or it was a Zoroastrian religion rehashed in a Israelite culture. But I believe that we can't ascribe this Messiah origin to the Persian culture, because it's far older than that. It's originally Babylonian. We look at Alexander Hislop's The Two Babylons, and he talks about the tri-god, mother, father, child religion that goes back to Babylon, obviously, saying that it was Nimrod, his mother, and their child, or possibly his wife and their child, Tammuz. But I've got a bit of another angle on this, and it ties to the Semite people of Babylon. So as I've spoken in the last video, that, Abraham came out of Ur, he came out of Babylon, he had family in Babylon. They were descendants of Shem in Babylon. So not only, it was a conglomeration of all the descendants of Noah. We've got Shem, Ham, and Japheth all in Babylon. As we know, Nimrod was a descendant of Ham. Shem's people were there, and I believe there were people of Japheth there as well. But when we look at the story of Abraham, this is the inception of the Israelite people. So we're not talking about the people of Jacob here, we're talking about the people of Shem here. And there were other Semites that were not Israelites. And this is who I think these Nabataean people are. I think that when Abraham was told to leave Babylon or Ur and to separate himself, and God had a plan for him and his people, we see in the Bible that Abraham's family were worshipping gods. They had little idols. When Isaac goes back to take a wife from his family's people, and then their child Jacob is sent back to his mother's people to take a wife, and he ends up with Leah and Rachel. And Rachel steals the gods of her father. Now, this man was a Semite. He was a descendant and a relation to the family of Abraham. and they were worshipping these gods in Babylon. So when we see these Chaldeans and they're worshipping the astrological gods, I think that these people are related to Shem, they're related to Abraham, but they are not given the blessing of Jacob or the family of Israel. And the blessing of Israel was the Messiah. The Messiah was to be born through the people of Jacob, not through the people of Japheth or Ham, or the other Semites for that matter. And this is how we know in the Bible when the Magi come to visit the Messiah from seeing the star. These people have been looking for this Messiah for a very long time and understood the astrological context of what the star meant. I've suggested that these people possibly were Zoroastrians. Some people say that they are actually Chaldeans, but who knows? We're looking at origins of these religions, and it seems that they could quite possibly have been the same people, and that the worship of Ahura Mazda in Persia comes from the worship of the Chaldeans. And I'll try to show why I believe that. So, who were the ancient Persians? The Persians, the ancient inhabitants of what is now Iran, created one of the ancient world's largest and most powerful empires that flourished from 550 BC to 330 BC. At its height, the Persian Empire, also known as the Achaemenid Empire, stretched from the eastern Mediterranean Sea to the western border with India and included a diverse array of cultures and ethnic groups. It was finally conquered by Alexander the Great during his invasion of Asia in the 4th century BC. The Achaemenid Empire was something drastically different from its predecessors, said Turaj Dareye, the Mashia Chair in Persian Studies and Culture at the University of California, Irvine, and the editor of Excavating an Empire, Achaemenid Persian in Lounge Duri. It was the first world empire. It's Afro-Eurasian empire because it included parts of Africa, Asia, and Europe. The ancient Persians were an Indo-Iranian people who migrated to the Iranian plateau during the end of the 2nd millennium BC. So what it's saying, who roamed the steppes with their livestock, they were ethnically related to the Bactrians, Medes, and Parthians. So we have this migration of Central Asians and people from the Caucasus migrating into or living in this region of Persia, which is today's Iran. Now, the Bible shows us in the story of the beasts of Daniel that we have first the beast of Babylon, or we have the statue image, the head of Babylon. Secondly, we have the beast of Media and Persia. So Media was a lesser kingdom to Persia, but it was first before Persia. And then we see Alexander the Great conquer Persia and Media, and we have the Empire of Greece. And following him was the Romans. So I'm looking at this article written by Michael Tazarian. He's an occult sort of researcher, and he is talking about the Medes, who were the forerunners to the Persians. It says, when Nebuchadnezzar was still building his magnificent palaces and temples in ancient Babylon, the Medes, the forerunners of the Persians, were already settled on the Tigris, and a century later, as Persian satellites helped to conquer half the world. This is a quote by Herbert Wendt. It began in Babel. So there's a lot of scholars who say this began in Babel. Now, the Medes were a people of Aryan origin who inhabited the western and northwestern portion of present-day Iran. By the 6th century BC, prior to Persian invasion, the Medes were able to establish an empire that stretched from Iran, in modern-day Republic of Azerbaijan, to Central Asia and Afghanistan. Today's population of the western part of the Iranian plateau, including many Persian speakers, Kurds, and Azeris, consider themselves to be descended from ancient Medes. Apart from the few personal names, the language of the Medes is almost entirely unknown, and it was mostly similar to the Avestan and Scythian languages. Herodotus lists name of 6 Mede tribes or castes. So Herodotus also mentions that the Medes had exactly the same equipment as the Persians, and indeed the dress common to both is not so much Persian as Median. Early historical reference to the Medes, the origin of the history of the Medes is quite obscure, as we possess almost no contemporary information and not a single monument or inscription from Media itself. The story that Ctesias gave, a list of 9 kings beginning with Arbaces, who is said to have destroyed Nineveh about 880 BC, preserved in Diode 232 and copied by many later authors, has no historical value whatever, though some of his names may be derived from local traditions. I'm terrible at pronouncing some of these names. Josephus relates the Medes to the biblical character of Madai, son of Japheth. So the Medes and the Persians are sons of Japheth. Now as to Javan and Madai, the sons of Japheth, from Madai came the Nabataeans, who are called Medes by the Greek Antiquities of the Jews 1:6. Other ancient historians, Strabo, Ptolemy, Herodotus, Polybus, and Pliny mention names such as Nabataean to designate the northern part of Media. Says we can see how the Iranian element gradually became dominant. Princes with Iranian names occasionally occur as rulers of other tribes, but the Galay, Tapuri, Kadusi, Amadi, Uti, and other tribes of northern Media and on the shores of the Caspian may not have been Iranian stock. Polybus and Strabo and Pliny considered the Anaraci to be among these tribes, but their name, meaning the not Aryans, is probably a comprehensive designation for a number of smaller indigenous tribes. So mainly the Persians come from Central Asia, they're coming back around, and from the Caucasus. The Medes, people of Mada, appear in history first in 836 BC. Earliest records show that Assyrian conqueror Shalmaneser II received tribute from the Amadei in connection with wars against the tribes of the Zagros. His successor undertook many expeditions against the Medes. So at this early stage, the Medes were usually mentioned together with other steppe tribes, the Scythians, who seem to have been the dominant group. They were divided into many districts and towns under petty local chieftains. From the names in the Assyrian inscription, it appears that they already adopted the religion of Zoroaster. So Zoroastrianism doesn't come from the Persians, it comes from the Medes. And this makes sense because the Anatolian version of Zoroaster or Ahura Mazda is Mithra. And the worship of Mithra in this region was pretty big. An Assyrian military report from 800 BC lists 28 names of Mede chiefs, but only one of these is positively identified as Iranian. A second report from 700 BC lists 26 names of these. 5 seem to be Iranian, the others are not. Said in spite of repeated rebellions by the early chieftains against the Assyrian yoke, the Medes paid tribute to Assyria under Sargon's successor, Sennacherib, Esarhaddon, and Ashurbanipal. Whenever these kings marched in with their fierce armies, Assyrian forts located in Median territory, Zagros Mountains, at the time of Esarhaddon's campaign in 676 included Bit Parnaki and Bit Kari and Harar. So it says here magus. A magus, plural magi from Latin via Greek. From Old Persian magus was a Zoroastrian astrologer priest from ancient Persia, from which is derived the term magic, magician, and also referred to as a sorcerer or wizard. The English term may also refer to a shaman. The best known magi are the wise men from the east in the Bible. The Greek word is attested from the 5th century BC as a direct loan from Old Persian magus. The Persian word is a eustem adjective from the Indo-Iranian root mag, powerful, rich, also continued in Sanskrit maga, gift, wealth, magavant, generous, a name of Indra. Avestan has maga, probably with the meaning sacrifice and sacrificer. So the Indo-European root appears to have expressed power or ability, continued in Greek mechos, sea mechanics, and in Germanic magen. The origin significance of the name for the Median priest thus seems to have been the powerful modern Persian mobed is derived from Old Persian compound magu pati, lord priest. In Persian, magi is megusin, meaning fire worshipper. It's the origin of the word magician. So they worship Prometheus, or they were in Greek, they worship Lucifer, basically, not in a scary, satanic view, but they worship the God that brought fire or knowledge, wisdom, and technology and stole it from God and gave it to man. So according to Herodotus, the Magi were the sacred caste of the Medes. They organized Persian society after the fall of Assyria and Babylon. Their power was curtailed by Cyrus, the founder of the Persian Empire. Now we'll go into that a bit in a second. And by his son Cambyses II. The Magi revolted against Cambyses and set up a rival claimant in the throne, one of their own, who took the name of Smerdis. Smerdis and his forces were defeated by the Persians under Darius I. The sect of the Magi continued in Persia, though its influence was limited after this political setback. So we see we've got these priests, these Magi, these astrological worshippers now in Persia. So they're in Media, they're in Persia. Have they come from Chaldea? During the classical era, some Magi migrated westward, settling in Greece. So they've gone to all the kingdoms of the earth, Greece and Italy, so Rome. For more than a century, Mithraism, a religion derived from Persia, was the largest single religion in Rome. The Magi were likely involved in this practice. So it's the same religion, fire worship. And we see that these Nabataeans, through their god Dushara, now are worshipping this god that holds the knowledge of fire. Well, in Herodotus, Magos referred to either a member of the tribe of the Medes or to one of the Persian priests who could interpret dreams. It could also be used for any enchanter or wizard, and especially to charlatans or quacks. So Michael Tazarian here he's quoting Wikipedia, an article called Cult of Mithras, Iranian Leviathan, and Jason Georgiani. Now, Jason Georgiani is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to Persian history and is a really good source on this information if you want to check him out. So who were the Mitanni? Mitanni in Hittite cuneiform from 1550 to 1260 BC, earlier called Habigolbat in the Babylonian texts. Habigolbat or Hani Rabat in Assyrian records, or Na'arin in Egyptian texts, was a Hurrian-speaking state in northern Syria and southeast Anatolia, modern-day Turkey. Since no historians or royal annals chronicles have yet been found in its excavated sites, knowledge about Mitanni is sparse compared to the other powers in the area and dependent on what its neighbors commented in their texts. The Hurrians were in the region as of the late 3rd millennium BC. A king of Urkesh with a Hurrian name, Tupkish, was found on a clay ceiling date 2300 BC at Tel Mozan. The first recorded inscription of their language was Tish Atal, 21st century BC, king of Urkesh. Later on, Hurrians made up of the main population of Mitanni. That was firstly known as Habigalbat in Babylonia, in two texts of the Old Babylonian period during the reign of Ami Saduka. Sorry about my pronunciation, in Middle Chronology. The Egyptian official astronomer and clockmaker Amenemhet apparently ordered to write on his tomb that he returned from the foreign country called Mytini. But Alexander von Levin and Eva von Dassau considered that the expedition to Mitanni could have taken place in Pharaoh Ahmose I's reign. Okay, so the Mitanni and Hittites equals Medes and Lydians, according to this article here, written by Emmett Sweeney. And it's in my newly published Theban Empire, Ages in Chaos Revisited. In the late 1980s, Professor Gunnar Heinsohn of Bremen University began to suggest that the Old Assyrians, as well as the Hyksos, were identical to the Imperial Assyrians of the classical authors. In conformity with this conclusion, he also argued that their conquerors, the Mitanni, were one and the same as the Medes, the Iranian-speaking people whom all the ancient authors agreed had been the conquerors of the Assyrians. Archaeologists had been unable to discover the Medes in the late Iron Age strata in which they were sought. And this problem, along with many others, said Heinsohn, was solved if we equate them with the Bronze Age Mitanni. Could it be that the Mitannians, whom conventional chronology normally placed in the 16th and 15th centuries BC, rightfully belong in the 8th and 7th? Examination of the evidence suggests that Heinsohn was correct, for the Mitannians were celebrated for their conquest of Assyria, a feat they repeatedly boasted of. The actual conquest of the old Assyrian kingdom is nowhere recorded in Mitannian documents, yet from the evidence available, it would appear that the Paratana, their first important king, opened hostilities and succeeded in overrunning a great portion of the Assyrian Empire. During this time, there were established in northern Syria a large number of potentates bearing Mitannian names and owing allegiance to him, but it was left to Paratana's successor, Shalshtata, son of Pasatata, who may have been the same as Paratana. Now, we've got this Tartar word popping up here, and quite possibly have the origins of the Tartarian Empire, which was an Indo-Iranian empire or related to these peoples who inhabited this region. To complete the conquest of the Assyrian heartland, and we hear in a document of a later time how Shalshtata plundered the city of Ashur and took the silver and gold doors of the royal palace to adorn his own residence in Washukani. The influence of Mitanni now made itself felt over the large section of the Near East. Members of the Mitannian aristocracy, the Mariana, assumed position of power and authority through Syria and Palestine, a circumstance strongly suggesting that these regions too had been conquered by them. So prominent was this folk that the pharaohs of the later 18th dynasty regularly sought wives from them. These were obtained after much courtship in the part of the Egyptians from the time of Thutmose IV onward. The kings of Mitanni gloried in the title Great King, and they were so named in various political correspondences of the period. Shalshtata's successor remained in control of the Assyrian land for the next 3 generations, and we find Tushratta, a contemporary of Akhenaten, sending the pharaoh the cult figure of a goddess Ishtar or Nineveh. From the personal names of Mitanni kings, we know that they were of a race who spoke the language closely related to Persian, virtually identical, in fact, to the Indo-Iranian language of the Medes. The text of a treaty between Mitanni and the Hittite land shows that Mitra, Varuna, and Indra, deities of Indo-Iranian origin, comprised of Mitanni pantheon. Indo-Iranian technological terms appear with great frequency in the Mitanni vocabulary. True, another racial and linguistic group, designated Hurrian, is evidence in Mitannian documents and personal names. The exact relationship between the Hurrian and Iranian elements is unclear, though it would appear that the Iranian group was dominant, for the Mitanni kings had clearly Iranian names. Hurrian is non-Indo-European and is closely related to the language of Urartu, the region of eastern Anatolia immediately south of the Caucasus, from the Iranian royal names and the Indo-Iranian gods worshipped by the Mitanni. So according to Britannica, Mitanni Indo-Iranian Empire centered in northern Mesopotamia that flourished from about 1500 to 1360 BC. At its height, the empire extended from Kirkuk, ancient Arabka, and the Zagros Mountains in the east, through Assyria to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. Its heartland was Khyber River region, where Wasukani, its capital, was probably located. Mitanni was one of the several kingdoms and small states, another being Huri, found by the Indo-Iranians in Mesopotamia and Syria. Although originally these Indo-Iranians were probably members of Aryan tribes that later settled in India and apparently broke off from the main tribes on the way and migrated to Mesopotamia instead. There they settled among the Hurrian people and soon became a ruling noble class called Marianu. These people are in Mesopotamia. Are they taking on these Babylonian Mesopotamian religions? And, we look at the archaeology in this region and it's pretty obvious to me that these three cultures of Egypt, Assyria, Media, and Babylon were all using the same gods and iconography. So here in Egypt, we have a winged disc, a winged sun, or a luminary with wings. So here we have a depiction of the Assyrian god Ashur, and he's a being in a disc with wings. And it says, did you know that the religion of ancient Assyria was quite similar to the famous beliefs and practices of ancient Egypt? Both civilizations believed in a multitude of gods, had a conception of an afterlife, and had leaders who ruled on behalf of the gods. The Assyrian king was the ruler of the nation and was in charge of governing the nation's army, laws, and politics. It says, relief depicting the Assyrian god Ashur. So now we see the Medes and the Persians using the same symbol. And this, if you just zoomed in on this winged disc here, you would assume that this was Egyptian. It's certainly not. It's Persian. It says this is from the time of their conquest by Cyrus the Great. The Medes were progressively integrated with the Persian cousins. Both nations appear side by side in the Persepolis relief. The Medes are distinguished by their bowl-shaped headgear. So they look practically the same people. They just got different headgear, clothing. And we have this ancient image of Ishtar. We have the solar star here, seven-pointed star of Ishtar. And she's the winged goddess. We know that this disc with the wings is referred to as Venus. Ishtar's the goddess. Ishtar, the goddess of love and protection, was prominent goddess from 3500 BC and until the 5th century BC. She is the Babylonian version of the Sumerian goddess Inanna. And here we have a Babylonian depiction of the solar disk or the sky disk with wings. Says here, the legendary hero Gilgamesh stands between two demigods represented in bigger sizes. Mesopotamian relief from the 9th century BC. So 900 years BC. And we have this image here of Gilgamesh, who I believe is said to be Nimrod.